Okay, today we'll be working on 5.3.3, how do I use the 5D process, strategies for using the 5D process. I want you guys to make sure you've got paper and pencil in front of you. If you do need paper, there is some extra graph paper over by the window. Make sure all of you have paper in front of you as you go through this video. You will be asked to write down your answers and be working through each of these problems on your paper before I work on them in the video. One of the ways I'll know you're doing this is I'll be able to ask you questions as we go along through the process. Okay, now let's go ahead and just read what we've got above. We've got math is used to solve challenging problems that apply to daily life. For example, how much fresh water is there on the planet? How many area codes for telephone numbers are needed in a city? Where should a city build transportation lines, such as city bus systems and subways to reduce traffic on the freeways? Mathematics can provide helpful insights to the answers to these questions. When you are trying to solve a new and challenging problem, it is useful to have a strategy. The 5D process that you learned about in 5.3.2 will often work when you are trying to solve a problem you have not seen before. In this lesson, you will practice using this process to solve more word problems. You will also compare different ways that your classmates use it to help them. Be sure to write your work neatly and be prepared to justify your reasoning. At the end of this lesson, you guys will all be asked to write your own answers to these questions. How can we describe the problem? How do we decide how to label the columns? How can we organize the columns? How can we decide which quantity to start with? Does it matter which one we choose? How can we decide which number to try first? Okay, well, let's go ahead and begin into our first problem. We've got problem 515. And it reads, a scalene triangle has 3 unequal side lengths. The medium length side is 7 centimeters longer than its shortest side. The longest side is twice as long as the shortest side. The total perimeter is 39 centimeters. What are the lengths of the sides of the triangle? Now, right now we're in our describe and draw section. Part of describing and drawing is going to be writing down some of the essential information that's just most important. We want to take out all of the fluff and just focus on what is most important. Now, one thing is, this is a perimeter problem. So I know I'm going to be dealing with adding up sides. Another thing I want to make sure is I've identified what's unique about each side. So we've got a small side that we don't know. We've got the medium is the small plus 7 centimeters longer than the shortest side. And the longest side is about twice the size of the shortest side. Now this is kind of me writing out some of the words, those essential things. One thing I'm also going to make sure to write out in my description is what is it even asking about? I want to make sure that I've identified what is most important here. What are we trying to get at? And that is, how long are the sides? So I think with this description, I've given a decent amount. I've cut it down to just the bare essentials. I'm also going to go ahead and draw a figure of this. They said it was triangle with each side of a different length. So I've got my short side right here. We know that the medium one was going to be the same length as my short side. So that same length plus another 7. and that the longest side was the same as two smallers. Alright, so I've kind of written out, I've drawn it now, all of my important information. Longest side is twice the length. My medium side is the shortest length plus a 7, and then we've also got the shortest side. Alright, so now that we've got that, let's go ahead and move on to the next portion of this problem. So we've already done our first D's, so we're talking about the 5 D's. There's our first one. Next one we want to define. Now we need to figure out how many columns we're going to put in there. To figure out your columns, you really should be looking at how many different values are we trying to get. Well, I know that I need to get 3 different values here. I need to get a value for side 1, for side 2, and for side 3. And I'm going to go ahead and label these. You can use whatever labels you want. Short, I'm going to use what they used, medium, and long. That way I know which one I'm talking about each time. So I figured out my columns by figuring out what are all the numbers I needed to do. Now, I'm not quite sure how to approach this problem, so I'm going to go ahead and make a guess. I want you guys to make your own guess. You don't have to use my numbers, and in fact, I'd really appreciate it if you didn't use my exact numbers. Make your own guesses, and then see how they work. Now, for my first guess, I'm just going to guess 5 for the short. Now, I do know that my medium was 7 longer, so that would be 5 plus 7. Would be 12. And then for my long side, the long side was twice the amount, so 2 times 5 means the long side here would be a 10. Alright, so now we've done that define stage. I figured out what are my lengths, what are the different sections I need to know about. Now I'm going to do the work that tests whether or not I guessed right on my first shot. So, we've got a length of 5 plus 12 plus 10. Now one thing I'm already noticing that's indicating I definitely did this wrong, the medium side is somehow longer than the long side. So already I'm kind of feeling like this probably isn't my answer. Now I see that perimeter, it's 27, so now I need to figure out, was that right? We knew the perimeter had to be 39, so I'm a little bit off. I'm too small. I need to start guessing bigger. So, go ahead and guess a little bigger. So I'll guess 10. So if the short side is 10, medium had to be 10 plus 7, needed to be 7 longer, so that's 17. Long side had to be twice the length, so 10 times 2, which would be 20. So now I've got my lengths for trial 2, add them all up, we've got 10 plus 17 plus a 20. It's going to equal 2747. Alright, so I went too far. As I jumped from 5 to 10, I suddenly got too big. So my guess of 10 was too big. For trial 3, now make sure if at any time I'm going too fast and you haven't been able to write enough, pause the video. Alright, trial 3. I'm somewhere between 5 and 10. I'm going to go ahead and guess a 7, which means that we're going to have 7 plus 7 here equal to 14. Doubling it would be 7 times 2 equals 14. I'm a little bit worried because my medium and my long are now the exact same length. So we're going to have 7 plus 14 plus 14, which is going to equal 31. So I once again got too small. I keep on getting closer, and I'm nearly there. What I want you guys to now do, finish this up. Finish up this table. Find what that final answer is, and then you're going to write down your answer in the declaration area. Don't just settle for saying, here's the number. Okay, the length of the short side is, you fill it in. The length of the medium side will be, and the length of the long side is. Make clear sentences stating exactly what the answer is. Alright, let's look at 116 now. Make sure to write on your paper 116. Okay, so we're now moving on to this. Make sure, like I said, that you're pausing the video when needed so that you're not missing out on information. Alright, Travis and Angela were playing Guess My Number game. Angela told Travis, I'm thinking of 2 positive numbers. The difference of my numbers is 4, and the product of my numbers is 96. What are my numbers? Help Travis to find Angela's numbers. Alright, so once again, when we're encountering problems we don't know, we're going to use this 5D process, beginning with describe and draw. So in my describing, first I'm going to write in some of the important information. I do know that we're dealing with 2 positive numbers. Also looking at this, I know that the difference of the numbers is 4. So if I write difference, tells me that I'm dealing with subtract. So subtracting the numbers is going to equal 4. The product refers to multiplication. So if I multiply these numbers, that is going to equal 96. Alright, so there's all of my important information. Now, this is just a purely numbers game. It's a bit harder to think of a diagram to draw here. However, what I can say, we're going to have 2 numbers. Now we know that one is going to be bigger than the other. We do know that if we subtract them, we're going to get a 4. So the difference between the two must be a 4. Now, as far as the product goes, showing that on this number line would be a little bit tricky. We don't quite know just how to do that. So this one, drawing is a bit trickier, but at least we've described out very specifically all the important information that's going to help us to solve this. Okay, so now we see our define, do, decide section. It's already been separated out, just like I said. In our define section, we're looking at how many numbers are we looking for? How many things are we trying to define? Well, in this case, just 2 different numbers. Okay, and I am going to try to add one thing to the decide. Hopefully you can figure out what that is by the time we get to it. What is that portion that we need to figure out? So first in my define, I'm going to just pick a number. Now we know, so let's just pick a number for the first one. Let's say 10. Now if the first number is 10, what is the second number going to be? We know that if we subtract them, we have to get a 4. So I know that the second number would have to be a 6. 10 minus 6 will give us the 4. So now let's go over to do. Once again, pick your own numbers as you do this. Okay? You guys can write down some of my numbers, but in your first attempts, use your own numbers. Make your own guesses sometimes. So now we're going to figure out, is the product 96? So, first number was 10. Second number was a 6. So we get 60. Is the product a 96? No. I got something that was too small. Okay, so let's go back. Let's try a second attempt. I know my first one was too small. So let's go ahead and try something a little bit bigger. Let's go for 20. So now I need to figure out that number. That 20 minus the second number should give me a 4. So that number is going to be 16. Okay, 20 minus 16 would give us 4. So let's try multiplying these. We got 20 times by a 16 is going to equal 320. So, is the product 96? I'm going to answer this. Way too big. Alright, so I definitely went larger. It definitely should be closer to the 10 than it is to that 20. We can see that the 20 is much further off. Alright, so now that I've gotten you started on this one, I want you now to try trial 3, trial 4, as many trials as you need to find out what is this exact number. Make sure as you finish, you are writing down your declaration. What are the two numbers? The first number is this, the second number is this. Okay. 517. The Potter Valley basketball team did not record how many baskets were made by each player during the last game. Jenny remembers that she made 3 times as many baskets as Grace. Grace knows that she made 6 more baskets than Grace. Joan thinks that she made 4 fewer baskets than Grace. Tammy is sure that she made the same number of baskets as Joan. Altogether, the 5 players made 40 baskets. How many baskets did each player make? Okay, so here is a real challenge. Now, for the describe and draw, we see a lot of information that we probably want to write out. So let's just jump right in and start getting each one of those. Okay, so first we've got important information. Now I'm just going to shorten everything. So Jenny remembers that she made 3 times as many baskets as Grace. So Jenny did 3 times as many as Grace. This is just my way of kind of shortening down all of the information. If you're writing out complete sentences, awesome. Great job. You are writing it in a way that everyone can understand it. Now we also know that Alexis, that she made 6 more baskets than Grace. So Alexis made 6 more than Grace. Joan thinks that she made 4 fewer baskets than Grace, so we got Joan. Everyone seems to be comparing themselves to Grace. Grace must be a very popular student. Okay, so once again, Joan made 4 fewer than Grace. So here's Grace, and here's Joan making 4 fewer. Tammy is sure that she made the same number of baskets as Joan. So Tammy and Joan, they're in the same position. We know that all of the players, all together, so that's going to be Joan, Alexis, Grace. Oops, let's change this a little bit. Joan, Alexis, Grace, and Tammy. If we add up all of their points or all of their baskets, they made 40 baskets in total. Okay, now we do have a bit of a situation in which we can, in fact, draw an image for this. So let's try starting with just Grace. As we said, a lot of people compared themselves to Grace. So first we've got Joan. Now Joan was saying that she did 3 times as many. So Joan is like a Grace plus a Grace plus another Grace, and that would be Joan. So we've got Joan, we've got Grace. We know that Alexis was 6 more than Grace. So here we've got Alexis, and she's going to be 6 more than whatever Grace had. Joan was Grace minus 4. I just realized I forgot to have Jenny. In there as well. So we got Joan and Jenny. If you saw that I was making that mistake, give yourself a pat on the back. Alright, so we got Jenny, and she's the one doing 4 fewer. So if we've got that's Grace, then let's go ahead and subtract 4. So we're going to be taking that off. Jenny is that smaller line from Grace. Alright, so here we've got a picture kind of illustrating each of our different athletes. Alright, so now that we've got all of that written up, alright, so let's get into this next section. Now we've got our columns out. Now each time we're making the columns for the define, we want to focus on how many different things are we actually trying to figure out. So we've got several, and let's put in that first place our popular student, Grace. And we can put these in any way that we want. Grace, Jenny. I didn't have to start with Grace, but I noticed that a lot of people compared themselves to Grace. And because of that, I felt it might be a bit easier to start with her. So I've got Grace, Jenny, Alexis, Joan, Tammy, all of our girls in there. Now, so first we're going to start out with just a guess. This is a very complex problem, and it could take a lot of time to solve, but actually using this guessing method may be one of the faster ways of going about this. Now, I do see that I've got about 5 girls, and we know they made 40 baskets. So I'm just going to try and start somewhere in the middle for my first guess. And I'm going to go to 8. So let's say that Grace made 8 baskets. Now, if Grace made 8 baskets, we know Jenny made 3 times as many baskets as Grace. So that would mean Jenny made 24 baskets. Alexis made 6 more than Grace. So if Alexis made 6 more than Grace, that means she did 14. Joan did 4 less than Grace. So she did 4. And Tammy did the same number as Joan. So once again, all I really did is I went through all of that information that we made sure to write out at the beginning. So what am I going to do? I'm going to add all of these up. So we've got 8 plus 24 plus 14 plus 4 plus 4 is going to equal, so let's see, 32, then a 46, 50, 54. 54 baskets. So are there 40 altogether? No. I went too big. Alright, so I went too big. Let's go ahead and try again. Let's go for 4. I'm just going to go through all my information again. Jenny was 3 times as many as Grace. Alexis was 6 more than Grace. Joan was 4 less than Grace, meaning Joan did nothing. So already I'm kind of worried about this. It's hard to forget that you scored absolutely nothing. And Tammy did the same as Joan. She did nothing. So as we add these up, we've got our 4 plus 12 plus 10 plus 0 plus 0, which is going to equal 26. Alright, so I went a bit small there. So once again, finish this up by working through the rest of it on your own. Make sure to declare firmly how many baskets each of the girls made. Alright, so now we've got Mrs. Pacheco, Mr. Edwards, and Mr. Richards, our 3 math teachers at Turner Middle School. Mr. Pacheco is 3 years older than Mr. Richards. Mr. Edwards is twice as old as Mr. Richards. The sum of Mr. Richards' age and Mr. Edwards' age is 81. How old is each person? Alright, so let's start to describe this. Alright, so first in my describe and draw, I want to really make sure I find out what is the important information. So I do see above that we've got Pacheco is 3 years older than Richards. So Pacheco is 3 years older than Richards. Okay, next piece of information. Edwards is twice as old as Richards. You guys will also notice that I'm not just simply simplifying it down to just letters, because we had 3 girls with the first letter J, and I don't and I'm scared of making a similar mistake again. Okay, finally we know Mr. Richards' age and Mr. Edwards' age is 81. So how old is each person? So, got Richards plus Edwards is 81. And we're trying to figure out how old each person is. Oh, I missed one. We've got Edwards is... Oh, no, so we've got it. So, just making sure again, 3 years older than Richards. We've got it. Twice as old as Mr. Richards. And the sum of their ages is 81. Okay, so first, in the define, we need to figure out how many columns we're going to do. How many pieces of information do we need? Well, I can think of 3. I've got Pacheco, I've got Edwards, and I've got Richard. So I've defined my columns, and now in my define I'm also going to pick some values to go ahead and start this off. So let's go ahead and say that Pacheco, well, Pacheco is going to be 3 plus Richards, so I need to know Richards first. So let's go ahead and just start with Richard. Let's say Mr. Richard is a very, very young 30-year-old. And now we can say Pacheco would be 3 years older, so he'd have to be 33. Edwards is going to be twice Richard's age, so Edwards is going to be a 60-year-old math teacher. Super exciting. All right, so now we've got our test to make sure that this is working. We've filled in our define section. Now we're going to do. It says the sum of Mr. Richards' age and Mr. Edwards' age should be 81. So we got a 60 plus 30 is 90. I'm too small. Okay, go ahead and try a new number. Figure out what's a new number that you could try for this problem and move through it. Once again, declare the age of each teacher, Pacheco, Edwards, and Richard. All right, now we're on problem 5119. Make sure to write that on your paper. All right, if you're at this point, you've come pretty far. You're doing a great job at using wrong answers to find right answers. Okay, you should be congratulated. Feel good about that. So, Ramon was studying pond life in Doyle Park. In 2 hours, he counted 4 more frogs and turtles. The number of crayfish he counted was 3 more than twice the number of turtles. In total, he counted 54 turtles and crayfish. How many frogs were there? All right, so describing and drawing, we need to lay out the important information. So we've got the turtles. We know that there were 4 more frogs and turtles, so if we take our turtles, add a 4, that should give us the number of frogs. The number of crayfish counted was 3 more than twice the number of turtles. Alright, so that's kind of a tricky one to write out. So crayfish is going to be 3 more than twice the number of turtles. In total, there were 54 turtles and crayfish. So turtles plus crayfish is 54. Alright, so think about how many columns will you need in define? I chose 3. I'm going to need for turtles. I'm going to need for crayfish. And I'm going to need for frogs. So now for my first trial, I'm going to guess a number that would get us up to crayfish plus turtles is going to be 54. Now we're going to start with frogs because we need to know frogs to know turtles. So let's just say, or you could start with any of them and figure out what it would have to be. There really isn't one and only one way. I kind of like frogs to start off with. So let's say we've got 10 frogs. Now if we've got 10 frogs, well, we know that the turtles plus 4 gave us frogs, which must mean turtles would have to be at 6. Now if turtles are at 6, then we also know that 3 more than twice the number of turtles, so twice the number of turtles would be 6 times 2 is 12, 3 more would be 15, so we would have 15 crayfish. So now let's do it. We're going to add turtles and crayfish. So 6 plus a 15 equals 21. What was that value we were expecting to get? 54. We're too small. Okay, go ahead and try to find the rest of this on your own. Okay, I will simply introduce this problem and leave this one entirely up to you. Dawn is trying to find the dimensions of a parallelogram. That means 4 sides, 2 pairs of sides are going to be parallel. She knows that the base is 1 unit less than twice the height of the shape. The area is 91 square units. How long are the base and height? Fill in your describe section. Figure out how many columns you're going to put in define and what are those columns going to be titled. Begin doing, check to see if your guess worked out, and then decide whether or not it's too high, too low. Once you find the answer that fits perfectly, declare what your answer is. So, at this point, you've reached the end of the video. Answer these questions. How can I describe the problem? How can I decide how to label the columns? How can we organize the columns? How can we decide which quantity we're going to start with? Does it matter which one we choose? And how can we decide which number to try first?